Hey, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and in today's episode, the part of my collection I'm going to be talking about is just some random Canadian content. It's July 1st today, as when I'm filming this, and here in Canada, we celebrate Canada Day on July 1st. Woo! And Canada Day is, we often refer to it as Canada's birthday. It's when the province that I'm in, Nova Scotia, and neighboring province New Brunswick joined up with the rest of Canada, and we became the Canada that we know today. So yeah, Canada's birthday, it's essentially our July 4th, and yeah, so it's a holiday. I'm home from work, and I thought it would be a good time to talk about just some Canadian toys in my collection. Now, the only thing is there's not a whole lot of exclusive Canadian toys. We pretty much get the same stuff everybody else gets. But there was a few things that I figured I could talk about today. So yeah, let's dive right into it and look at some of the Canadian stuff in my collection. Now, we all know that G.I. Joe is a real American hero. So, all the characters are American, with the exception of one or two. Like Big Ben is from England. You had the October Guard. They were kind of the Russian equivalent to G.I. Joe. But Backstop here, he is the only G.I. Joe that I'm aware of who was actually from Canada. So you'll see here on his file card that it says his birthplace is Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So yeah, I think he is the only one. So yeah, here he is. That's pretty cool. Now, the reason I've got Snow Job Stanton here is he is American. However, in Canada here, especially in the early years of the vintage G.I. Joe line, so we're talking 82, 83, 84, when they sold G.I. Joe products here in Canada, sometimes they made some slight changes. So that there is not the vintage Snow Job figure, but this file card is from the vintage 1983 Snow Job, which I still have. And you'll notice here that it says his birthplace is Yellowknife, which is the Yukon Territory of Canada. Now, I'm not even sure what his file card said when you bought him in the States, but it definitely didn't say that he was from the Yukon. So they did that with a fair amount of G.I. Joes in the vintage line, is that they would change their birthplace to Canada, which I guess was just to help Canadian kids relate to them a little bit more. Another thing you'll notice here is the file card is bilingual, because Canada is officially a bilingual country. So you've got the English and the French on there as well. Now, what I've got here are a couple of vintage G.I. Joe vehicles. They're not in the best condition. I've had these vehicles since I was a little kid in the early 80s. So this here is my snowmobile. You'll see the front's skis are busted off. It's missing some pieces. I might have the loose pieces laying around, but this is how I dug it out of the bin. And that there's the vintage APC, or Armored Personnel Carrier. So these are the same toys that any American kid would have got, but you'll probably notice some of the stickers on there. So right on the front, it's got a Canada sticker, same as the snowmobile, and it's got the Canadian flag, as does the APC. So that was pretty common on vintage toys when I was a kid, is that even though it's got, the American G.I. Joe logo on it and everything, it would still come with these little Canadian stickers and Canadian flags, just to, make me buy it more, I guess. But yeah, I appreciated the little nod to Canada. So that's kind of neat. So you'll see here, this is another vintage G.I. Joe vehicle. This is the Cobra Jeep and the Cobra missile launcher, which it tows behind it there. And you could get these exact same vehicles in kind of olive green, and they were G.I. Joe vehicles, but they were recast in black plastic and sold as Cobra vehicles. And this was exclusive to Canada. This was only available at Sears in Canada. So I had no idea about that when I was a kid, so I did not know that this was a rare item. But yeah, this is a lot of people's grail item, I guess you could say, from the vintage line, because yeah, a lot of American collectors didn't even know this thing existed until the internet several years later. And I actually do have this complete, this missile command center here. It detaches from the Jeep, It's got this little control thing here, and there's a stand that comes with that. These things fold out, and then it came with 3 big missiles on the top that launched off the top of there. And I actually have all that stuff laying around. I just didn't want to dig it out. As you can see, I don't really handle my vehicles very often. They're pretty dusty. But yeah, so that was pretty cool. This was one of only 2 Canadian exclusive vehicles. They did the same thing. They took a G.I. Joe vehicle, the tank called the Mobat, and they cast that in black as well. And that was sold as a Cobra tank, and that was exclusive to consumers distributing stores here in Canada. Now, another G.I. Joe related thing I want to show you here is this factory bootleg figure, which was made by Black Major. You might have seen me talking about Black Major toys in my last couple of videos. I've only recently started picking them up, but he's a guy that makes these really high quality, bootleg G.I. Joe toys. So this here, I'm not sure what he calls them, but I would call him Canadian Cobra Diaco. So yeah, what you've got there is a chrome head from the vintage Snake Eyes figure on a flash body. And the reason that I wanted this one, and this is actually the first one I picked up from him, and it started me buying a few more, but you'll notice that the emblem on his chest is a Canadian maple leaf with the Cobra logo inside, which I just thought was really cool. And he's, painted in the Canadian colors of red and white. So yeah, this is not an officially licensed G.I. Joe figure, but yeah, pretty cool little novelty to have. Now, also Joe related, I have some kind of unlicensed stuff to tell you about. First thing here, you might have noticed my t-shirt. I'm wearing a Rap Viper t-shirt from the Word Burglar. The Word Burglar is a Canadian rapper. He's actually a personal friend of mine. He's from Nova Scotia here. But yeah, he plays all over the States. He's just recently over in Japan, I think it was, doing some shows. And yeah, he's a great rapper. He's really funny and full of nerdy references. He put out a whole album that was based on G.I. Joe. Every song was about G.I. Joe characters. But even that album aside, which was called Escape from Cobra Island, all of his albums, and I think he has probably 6 or 7 out now, but yeah, they're full of just fun nerdy references. So check out the Word Burglar. He's got some videos on YouTube. He's got a video for Rap Viper, which I strongly recommend you check out. So when you're done watching this video, go check out the Rap Viper video by the Word Burglar. Another item I want to tell you about. Now, I've put this binder together myself, but this is a series of cards and stickers that are being produced by a local artist here. His name is Chris Hemsworth, like the Thor actor. No relation as far as I know. I've met Chris a couple of times. I don't really know him personally, but I'm a big fan of his work here. So basically what he does is he's got a project right now called the G.I. Joe 365 project, where he's drawing each action figure in the order they were released on these little trading cards. So it's a really cool collection. I think he's got up to 1987 done now. But yeah, I just really love his style of artwork, his attention to detail. These are really cool cards. So you can find Chris on Facebook, on Instagram. He's got his own website. So yeah, either look him up as Chris Hemsworth or the G.I. Joe 365 project, and you can find yourself some of these cards. I highly recommend them. They're just a really neat little collectible. And yeah, Canadian made. So track these down. I just wanted to quickly give you a closer look at some of Chris's cards. So you'll see here the artwork here for Shipwreck. All the cards are numbered. These symbols here mean various things. So the waves mean he's Navy. The paw print means that he came with an animal sidekick. On the back of the card there, you get some details about the year that it was released. You get another picture of his pet Polly there, as well as a drawing of the accessories that he came with. Here's another card, Zorana, one of my favorite characters. Again, I love the artwork style. You can tell that it's kind of sketchy with some of these crazy lines kind of scribbled all around. Just looks really cool, really unique. her symbols there signify that she's a female and that she was a member of the Dreadnoks. On the back there, you see the Dreadnok logo. You'll notice here her skin is colored in blue, just to show off that feature of the original toy that turned blue when you put her in the sunlight. And also here, I just want to show you some of the stickers here. So there's Cobra Commander. That does just peel off. And yeah, so you can have that cool little Cobra Commander sticker as well. So by all means, check out GIJoe365.com if you want to order some of these products. I know he does some prints and some calendars and all kinds of cool stuff. Now these figures here might very well be the most Canadian thing I have to show you. So this is a line of figures that was launched in 2012. You'll see here, so it's called Heroes Force. And these were created by a guy named Shannon Thibodeau, who was a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. And yeah, he actually worked at a base Borden in Ontario, which is where I spent many years as a kid, because my dad was also in the Armed Forces. And yeah, from grades kindergarten to grade 3, I lived on Borden. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, apparently this guy wanted to get some military action figures for his kids. But of course, there was nothing to represent Canadian soldiers, so he made these himself, along with a friend of his who was a graphic designer named John Allen Sperry. And Sperry was from Nova Scotia, where I am from. So yeah, it's kind of cool that a guy from Borden and a guy from Nova Scotia teamed up to create these characters. So you'll notice this guy here is in the Air Force, and his name is Thibodeau, named after the creator, Shannon Thibodeau. And $1 from each one of these figures was donated to charity there, the Soldiers Fund. And so there's a little bit of a write-up on the back there as well. Of course, it's in both official languages. So I've been keeping these figures carded. I just keep them pinned up on my wall just because I think they're really neat. Unfortunately, when I took them down to show you, I noticed that the bubbles are starting to come undone on some of these figures, so hopefully they don't fall apart on me. But so in wave 1, there was 3 different figures. So you've got Thibodeau from the Air Force. Then this is Sperry, named after the co-creator, John Allen Sperry. And this guy is from the Army. So you'll notice the crests on their hats are a little different with each one. The figures are identical, but this guy's got a mustache painted on. And then the third figure in the series is Watson, and he's from the Navy. And yeah, so he's got his full beard. Again, different logo on the hat. So yeah, these guys represent all the various divisions of the Canadian Armed Forces. And you'll notice they don't really come with any accessories. They just came with kind of a little dog tag, which you can see placed in there behind them. And this was a small little project. These were available, I think, only in Nova Scotia and Ontario. And fortunately, my local comic shop, Strange Adventures, was carrying them, so I was able to pick them all up. And yeah, they were successful enough that they decided to do a second series of figures. So this is series 2. And you'll notice now that you've got the desert camouflage. And now the figure comes with a backpack and a rifle. And you've got the Arctic camo. Same thing, backpack and rifle, except this guy even comes with some snowshoes on his backpack, which is pretty cool. And then you've got this green camo. And so again, unlike the other guys, I'm not sure this camo might be the same pattern as the other figures, but this one is different in that it's got a backpack, it's got a machine gun. This guy, is different ethnicity, and he's got the helmet instead of the little beret that the other guys were wearing. So yeah, very cool. I don't know where you can pick these things up now. You might still be able to buy them from Shannon Thibodeau. The website that they used to have up is down, but there is still a Facebook page. So if you want to see if you can get your hands on these, just go to the Heroes Force Facebook page and reach out to these guys and see if they still have them available, because they're pretty cool. And while I did want to keep a whole set carded for myself, I did want to open one of these guys up to play with them and see what they were like quality-wise. So I did actually get a second copy of the Desert Trooper here. See the Canadian flag on his sleeve there. rifle. There's the backpack, so it fits into a hole on his back. You can see the articulation there. So, kind of ball jointed arms they swing out, bends at the knees and elbows. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Turns at the head. Helmet not removable. And if you want to see just kind of as a size comparison, I've put him up here next to a vintage Joe and a modern Joe. So size-wise, he's kind of somewhere in between. He's pretty well to scale with vintage Joes. So if you're wondering if you pick these guys up and how you could display them, they kind of fit in either way, but probably most appropriately with the vintage Joe. Okay, so let's talk Marvel superheroes. So here we've got Wolverine and Deadpool, both very popular characters, and both Canadian characters. I think that's pretty well known. They're not shy about mentioning that these guys are Canadian in the comic books and in the movies. So, that's something I'm glad they didn't change for the movies and make these guys Americans or anything like that. So, yeah, these are the most popular Canadian superheroes. A couple other ones is, I'm not even 100% sure on this one, but this is Sabretooth, who is like Wolverine's longtime nemesis. And I think he's Canadian as well, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Then also, in the Marvel Universe, Canada has its very own super team called Alpha Flight. Now, the only member of Alpha Flight that I have in this current Marvel Legends style here is Sasquatch, which is, he's a dude that turns into a Sasquatch. And he was a Build-A-Figure in a recent Deadpool wave, actually, because he's got ties to Deadpool. So, there you go. There's a Sasquatch. Now, when it comes to Alpha Flight, I do have a few more of the members in the old Toy Biz style figures from the early to mid 90s. So here is the Toy Biz version of Sasquatch, which is still a pretty nice figure. Then we also had the one-time leader of Alpha Flight. So this here is Vindicator. See here, she's got her rooted hair ponytail, but she's very clearly a Canadian superhero because she's wearing the Canadian flag as her costume. Now, her legs kind of warp there, so I don't think she's going to stand up on her own. But another member of Alpha Flight that I had in the old Toy Biz days is Snowbird here. Now, this is a pretty nice figure, too. Her cape is kind of in the way here, but there you go. So there you see Snowbird. And her main ability was to be able to turn into, oddly enough, I think it was just basically Canadian wilderness creatures. So this figure actually came with a snowy owl, as well as, I guess this is probably a Wolverine. Some sort of little badger or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so she could turn into this stuff. Now, I don't know if she could turn into an elephant or whatever she wanted to. I didn't read nearly enough Alpha Flight comic books to be aware of it. But still, it's a nice looking figure. The last Alpha Flight figure I had from Toy Biz is this somewhat embarrassing Canadian superhero. This is Puck. So he is he's a little person. And you'll notice he has this action feature where he kind of bends to one side. He's got like an elastic or something inside of him. And the idea was that you let go of him and he would do a somersault, because that's basically all he was. He was a little midget acrobat, and his name was Puck because he was so small. He'd wear this black costume. He's basically dressed as a hockey puck, and he would just roll around like a hockey puck would do. So yeah, that's one of Canada's premier superheroes. Now, also in the Toy Biz days, this guy doesn't really count as a Canadian superhero, but this is, like Sasquatch, this is Wendigo. So, he's famously from the very first comic where Hulk fought Wendigo, and then Wolverine showed up in the Canadian wilderness. So, he is a Canadian character, not necessarily a superhero, kind of a Canadian monster from Marvel Comics. And the last one I have to show you is not from either Marvel Legends or the 90s Toy Biz line, but it's from the 3 3/4 Marvel Universe line. So this here is Guardian. And this here was the husband of Vindicator. And it was only after he died in the comic books that she took over his costume. And for a while, I think she was calling herself Guardian and then later Vindicator. So, yeah, it's cool that I have them both. It would be nice if they were in the same scale, though, because this is kind of a weird pairing. But, yeah, still, pretty cool figure. So it's nice to have Canada represented with so many characters, even if a lot of them are, nothing to really call home about. So I think it's pretty well known that Wolverine and even Deadpool are from Canada. They talk about that quite regularly in the comic books. But when I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about in this video, I was trying to think, is there any DC comic book characters that are from Canada? And I really had no idea. I had to Google it, and the only prominent character I found is Booster Gold. So there you go. I guess he's Canadian. But the big two companies aside, we do have some independent comic books here in Canada. Probably the most popular one that features a Canadian superhero is Captain Canuck. This guy's been around since the 70s, and there's been various incarnations. The book has never run for very long periods of time. I'm pretty sure there's a current version running right now, but not published on a monthly basis or anything. This is a hardcover collection of the original stories. See if I got a cool shot here. Well, there's Captain Canuck doing his thing. Anyway, so this is just kind of a cool little Canadian superhero. I don't know if anybody's heard of him outside of Canada, but if you're curious, check him out. This book was actually published by IDW, so you can get the whole original collection. It was only 2 volumes of this. So yeah, you can get the whole original run of Captain Canuck. And yeah, check out some of the current books being published as well. Now, another Canadian property I want to talk about just quickly as far as Canadian comic books go is Scott Pilgrim. Now, this is a comic book that's written and drawn, and I don't know, I think it's only published in black and white. Maybe it's been colorized. I'm not sure. Brian might do everything, or he might get some help. It's Brian Lee O'Malley who created Scott Pilgrim. He's Canadian. I don't know if he's from Nova Scotia, but he used to live here for a while. I had the pleasure of playing poker with him once. Anyway, he does the comic book Scott Pilgrim, and then they made this big budget American movie based on the comic book, and it was a ton of fun. So even if you weren't familiar with the comic book, you might be familiar with the movie. And they did make some action figures based on this as well. So yeah, I recommend you check out the comic, the movie, and the toys. So Scott Pilgrim by Brian Lee O'Malley, and his current book right now is called Snot Girl. So yeah, check that one out as well. So I think I'm pretty much done with this video. I just figured I'd throw a few more random Canadian things at you before I wrap it up. So there's quite a few wrestlers that have come from Canada. Chris Jericho is Canadian. Both Edge and Christian are Canadian. A lot of people don't realize this, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, his father is Canadian, and he actually came from Amherst, Nova Scotia. So, the humble little province that I come from. So yeah, lots of ties to Nova Scotia in this video here. But my favorite Canadian wrestler, and probably the most famous, is Bret the Hitman Hart here. So this is my old LJN Bret the Hitman Hart figure. Here's a version of Bret from The Simpsons. Another famous Canadian fighter is Georges St. Pierre, UFC champion. So we got him there. That's a Funko Pop. Now I've got quite a few Funko Pops representing Canadians. For example, Mike Myers is a Canadian export. So I've got him represented in both Austin Powers and Wayne. Keanu Reeves, very popular Canadian actor. I've got him represented here as Ted from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, as well as Neo from The Matrix. I've got a couple figures from one of my all-time favorite movies, The Lost Boys. So we've got both Corey Haim and Kiefer Sutherland. And a couple more Funkos. Now these guys are fictional. But we've got Terrance and Philip from South Park. South Park, for whatever reason, always represents Canadians as having these bobbly little heads. So not only do I have Terrance and Philip, who are famous Canadian TV personalities in the South Park world, but also I have Kyle's adopted little brother, Ike. Or is it Stan's little brother? I don't know. Anyway, so I've got all three of them. And yeah, then just the last random Canadian figure I could think of to throw in here is Hayden Christensen. So this guy who played Anakin Skywalker in both Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, he is Canadian as well. And I'm sure there's probably quite a few action figures in my collection based on Canadian actors. But these are the ones that kind of jumped to mind immediately when I started to throw this video together. So, yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so that was a bunch of random Canadian stuff. I hope you found it fun and informative, and maybe you'll take some of my recommendations and check out some things like the Word Burglar, Chris Hemsworth's trading cards. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Happy Canada Day. And if you liked this video, hit like, hit subscribe to the channel, and yeah, please leave me comments below. So until next time, ciao.